My name is Meg Perret, and I'm a graduate student at Harvard History of Science and Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies. This talk is titled, Why Do Pandas Have So Little Sex? Representations of Giant Panda Reproduction in Captive Breeding Programs, 1985 to 2020. Giant pandas are notoriously difficult to breed in captivity. As the symbol of environmental nonprofit World Wildlife Fund, the giant panda has possibly raised more funds for conservation than all other species combined. Yet, scientists still struggle to get them to reproduce reliably in captive breeding programs. Since 1985, most scientific research on the reproduction of pandas in captivity cites abnormal male reproductive behavior, specifically either lack of libido or excessive aggression of males towards females, as the primary cause of failed matings. In order to improve the reproductive success of pandas, scientists have used assisted reproductive technologies and more outlandish tactics, such as administering Viagra to the pandas and arranging panda speed dating. Further, conservation organizations have collaborated with the free pornography website Pornhub to create a database of videos of panda-costumed humans having sex to encourage sexual interest in male pandas. With the New York Times headlines such as, Lousy Libidos, Why Do Pandas Have So Little Sex? Media coverage often uses gendered rhetoric to emphasize the abnormality of panda reproduction. Through examination of this case study, this talk analyzes how cultural norms of gender and sexuality influence how biodiversity scientists and the popular media describe the reproduction of endangered species. In 1996, the IUCN Captive Breeding Specialist Group met in Chengdu, China, where they estimated that only 6 living male pandas in captivity had ever mated naturally. In 2004, a collaboration between researchers at the San Diego Zoo and Chinese scientists evaluated the behavioral factors influencing reproductive outcomes in captive pandas. Zhang and colleagues argue, quote, the primary factor that limits mating success is the lack of male sexual motivation and/or copulatory proficiency, close quote. As the first survey of captive panda reproduction, the study found that most instances of mating failure were attributed to male behavior. In nearly half of mating failures, the male mounted but did not copulate. In about 1/3 of mating failures, the male lacked sexual motivation and showed excessive aggression about 20% of the time. As the scientists interpreted this data, in the majority of cases, males lacked the sexual motivation to complete successful mating. Media articles focused on the low libidos of male pandas. For example, the Washington Post in 2001 wrote that scientists can only guess why, quote, captive male pandas so often respond to fertile females with hostility instead of hugs, or worse, by yawning and walking away. So abiding is romantic ennui among captive male pandas that some scientists have actually considered slipping the big brutes some Viagra. The article continues that some people consider pandas to be a failure of evolution, doomed to extinction in part because their social and sexual needs are so specialized. As written in the article, pandas are, quote, so stupid about sex that they just don't have what it takes for a species to stay afloat, close quote. The article quotes biologist Ron Swaisgood at the San Diego Zoo's Center for the Reproduction of Endangered Species as refuting these claims and explaining that describing pandas as sexually incompetent is an older idea based on early failings of captive management. So both scientific and popular portrayals of the abnormalities in male panda reproductive behavior inadvertently resonate with underlying gendered narratives that portray male pandas as sexually deficient, which reinforces sexual stereotypes of men as being more sexually aggressive and having higher libidos than women. This also reflects an early scientific research orientation guided by the assumption that captive males often lacked the supposed natural male aggression observed in the wild. In 2004, researchers at the San Diego Zoological Society, Conservation International, and World Wildlife Fund reported on the results of a 3-year biomedical survey of China's captive pandas. They concluded that there are multiple factors impeding panda mating in captivity, including that male aggression often limited the introduction of males to females for mating, as aggressive males could injure their mate during the breeding encounter. Seemingly paradoxically, the researchers also contend that aggressiveness and being born in the wild were personality traits that were most likely to be associated with successful breeding. More specifically, their results showed that aggressiveness was a useful behavioral characteristic if both males and females were aggressive, but not when only one sex was. In a related research collaboration between the Smithsonian National Zoo, San Diego Zoo, and Chinese scientists, David Wilt and colleagues speculate that males may be aggressive because of misplaced aggression towards females that would have been naturally expressed as competition between males in the wild. According to these researchers, aggressiveness in females in captivity would then allow them to be more competent in managing aggression in their mate. They also clarify, quote, obviously there's a fine line between healthy aggressive behavioral characteristics, which contribute to successful reproduction, and inappropriate aggressive behaviors that thwart successful mating, close quote. These studies interpret the behavior of captive animals in relation to behavior observed in the wild, despite animals being in human-dominated environments that drastically alter how pandas relate to one another socially. This rhetoric shares some similarities with sociobiological theories of the supposed naturalness of male sexual aggression. Interestingly, media articles reported on male panda sexual aggression were largely absent from popular science discourse in the 2000s. Instead, the narrative that captive male pandas are sexually deficient persisted into the early 2010s. For example, a 2010 Scientific American article titled Porn for Pandas writes, quote, pandas are endangered in part because the males prefer eating to mating. Giant panda dudes in captivity would rather sit around and munch on bamboo than get it on with females, close quote. The article reports on several measures to try to increase male libido, which include showing them panda porn or videos of pandas having sex. As they describe, quote, in the privacy of their cages, captive male pandas watch the sights and sounds of lovemaking on TV, close quote. They also detail the pandas' sexercises, or exercises intended to strengthen the male's legs to increase sexual stamina. Lastly, scientists choreograph the equivalent of panda threesomes, which refers to exposing multiple male pandas to one female. This media article demonstrates a key difference between the historical development of scientific and popular discourse on panda reproductive behavior. While researchers initially downplayed the role of mate choice, research in the 2010s increasingly demonstrated the importance of pandas choosing their mate in determining reproductive outcomes. In 2015, Megan Martin Windle and colleagues at the San Diego Zoo argued that mutual mate choice, when both partners show preference for one another, significantly increases reproductive success of giant pandas. They found that pandas were 50% more likely to mate and have cubs if one partner was preferred. Copulatory success was 80% when both partners were preferred, with a 90% chance of the mating producing a cub. Rates of mating were 0% if neither was preferred. In 2017, an article provocatively titled, "Do Opposites Attract? Effects of Personality Matching in Breeding Pairs of Captive Giant Pandas on Reproductive Success," scientist Martin and colleagues studied how personality traits impact mate choice. Commenting on the debate on male aggression, Martin finds that low aggression females paired with high aggression males had higher mating success. Martin writes that although managers try to minimize aggression during breeding, pandas should be allowed to express a certain amount of aggression. They write that furthermore, management strategies may be required to actually increase aggressiveness in some males whose levels of aggression were too low. They note that aggression is a natural part of the mating system of wild pandas, and thus it should not be surprising that it has a favorable influence on mating success. Popular scientific media reported on Martin's findings. In 2015, a Live Science article titled "The Key to Making Baby Pandas Love" writes, quote, "There's a secret to making panda babies, and it looks a little bit like love. If love is too strong a word for this preference, it's safe to say that panda lust, at least, plays a role in reproductive success." Close quote. Similarly, a 2015 National Geographic article writes, quote, "Giant pandas that are crazy about each other produce more cubs than panda couples lacking that mysterious spark." In describing the pair of pandas at the Smithsonian National Zoo, the article remarks, quote, "Such unsatisfying arranged marriages are all too common for pandas." In characterizing the results of "Do Opposites Attract?", the scientific article that originally reported these findings, National Geographic relays that females were, quote, "twice as likely to give birth to cubs if their partner was a love interest rather than just the boring guy next door," close quote. The article quotes the lead scientist Martin as saying that panda attraction is, quote, "really complicated just like in humans," close quote. These popular scientific articles evoke anthropocentrism, which portrays panda mating behaviors in relation to human romance and sex. The articles described here are also examples of how gender and sexual norms can travel across the human-animal binary. Although mostly absent from her scientific writing, Martin reinforces anthropocentrism through her quote featured in National Geographic that compares panda mate preference to attraction in humans. The title of her scientific article, "Do Opposites Attract?", also reflects heterosexual framings of women and men as supposed opposite sexes. It references the scientific doctrine of sexual complementarity, which holds that male and female sexualities are polar opposites that complement one another and are determined by biology. The popular scientific articles similarly deploy heteronormative framings of sexual relationships, such as evoking heterosexual romantic tropes such as the guy next door and unsatisfying arranged marriages. While feminist biologists have argued that female mate choice provides an opportunity for describing the agency of female animals in evolutionary biology, descriptions of the agency of female pandas are notably absent from both scientific and popular writing. Debate surrounding the role of male aggression in panda reproduction resurfaced in 2020 when a PBS Nature documentary titled "Pandas Born to be Wild" captured the first footage of panda breeding in their natural habitat. The video narration describes the aggression and competition between two males who pursue a female and, quote, "hold her hostage," close quote, in a tree. The Washington Times reports that the, quote, "uncuddly truth about pandas is that bears are tough, sexually potent survivors, not the hapless bunglers we created as zoo attractions," close quote. They continue that the male that wins the competition for the female would have sex over 40 times in a single afternoon. Fox News host Tucker Carlson also reported that, quote, pandas are sex-crazed and aggressive, and the real panda is a secret stud with a taste for flesh and a fearsome bite. As I have argued, research on captive pandas describing low male libido or male aggression towards females as the primary cause of poor reproductive outcomes. By 2015, there was a shift in scientific research that instead emphasized mate compatibility as the central issue in panda captive breeding. Throughout the history of scientific research in this subfield, scientists have referred to the importance of developing ecologically informed captive breeding programs that mimic the social and sexual systems of wild pandas. Yet, as I have shown through my analysis of both scientific and popular representations, the behavior of captive pandas has also been inadvertently but persistently described through reference to human sexual stereotypes that are naturalized and normalized. These findings have implications for framing the goals of captive breeding programs for endangered species, especially when there's limited possibility of releasing animals back into the wild due to dwindling habitat. Thank you all for listening.